Alright, what's up guys? So I'm sure the people that actually are left on my Facebook and or followers and new friends on Twitter or on my YouTube channels that I have, PSA informative videos about the dangers of Islam and Muslim culture, away from my astrology, even though they seem to overlap, because in my argument with that, everything's interrelated. It's actually how I came to the conclusion of all this, by looking at cycles and just looking at current events and using common sense. But anyway, not going to go any further than that. So, not only do I have that migrant pandemic page, which obviously isn't getting a lot of attention, but to be fair, I have stumbled across other pages that have quite a following, so I'm not insulted by the minimal followers I do have. In fact, I'm just trying to connect with proper channels in order to collaborate and work together as a cooperative unit with other organizations. That being said, one particular organization, I guess one organization I'd like to mention, because they aren't getting a lot of attention as far as in my views, and I think that's very sad, because just because they don't have some sort of entertainment value per se to their message, and it's purely educational, that I think that's why they're being overlooked. You know, why do you always gotta get involved when I'm doing a video? Every time. It's not you, it's the kids. Anyway, so it's the Glazikov gang. They're not only on YouTube, but they have their own website as well. And it was actually founded on some ex-Muslims. So I would assume they would know what they're talking about. Very thorough and informative with the information, and having different guest speakers on to give the dialogue some variety so it doesn't look like it's a narrative. The main one that I'm going to talk about is the counterjihadcoalition.org. And not only do I like this page because it's informative and it's taken it directly from holy texts in the Quran, Muhammad's biography, and from sociological institutions that are within the Muslim Brotherhood, the Muslim states, and the Muslim culture in general. Roughly 15% of the actual cultural behavior of Muslims is from the Quran. So the Sunnis are the ones that I always hear about in the media. They try to say that there's a difference between them and the radicals, but 80% of the Muslim culture, and ideally the Islamic State and their Islamic law and Sharia law, is based on what is instilled within their communities. So basically what that tells me is that the reason why a lot of the percentage isn't depicted right from the Quran, because women aren't allowed to have rights, and that's essentially half of the population, I would assume. And if they're not allowed to have rights, then they can't go to school, they can't learn to read and write, therefore they wouldn't be able to read the damn Quran in the first place. So that would totally explain why the cultural institutions are more of an influence than the actual book. So when there's moderate Muslims that come on and say, like, you know, I just want there to be a rectification with the Quran and be more modernized, like the New Testament and the Holy Bible, and they're not wearing a headscarf, and they start actually having dialogue with a radical Muslim that starts jumping their ship because they're not wearing a headscarf, that person, I would suspect, is legitimately genuine, because they were just raised in that. And even if they were the offspring of Muslim immigrants that came here and they were completely Americanized, sociological institutions would still instill some sort of personal psychological triggers and norms with the parents that would then be replicated and presented or displayed in front of the child during its psychological development stages. So without even trying, they would actually be influencing their kid to understand Muslim ideology. The same argument can be said with some people in the satanic community. If they're, you know, in their mid-30s, their parents were likely religious because of baby boomers, and even though they claim that they're completely against Christianity, they then develop these moral ethic views they just find to make sense, and they actually align more with Christianity than they probably understand. And that's because regardless of them completely wiping out their family's culture and religious views, they cannot wipe out the subconscious influence. So that, I'm now starting to understand a little bit of why there are some Muslims that are in America that are saying that they're moderates, and then there's some of them that still wear the headscarf and say that there's peaceful Muslims. The ones that keep saying that Islam is a religion of peace, first off, it's not a religion. It's already been discussed. I'll discuss that in some of the pamphlets. Secondly, if they're saying that, that is the Taqiyya, or the Mecca ideology, where they're trying to butter you up. It's a psychic vampire kind of thing. Or a psychopath. If you go like to BuzzFeed or whatever and look up, telltale signs of like dating a psychopath or something. I know there's some articles like that. You could just apply that into a person that's of Muslim association, and you'll be able to see that there's some correlations between the two. So the objectives of the outreach program is to inform the public about the problems regarding Islamic ideology, give honest and well-documented answers to questions about Islam, and then recruit new members for the organization. I'm willing to work with people within 50-mile radius. So if you live like in Ellensburg, Leavenworth, Kashmir, I could even stretch to Yakima. I really don't want to go anywhere near the Tri-Cities because there's actual refugee camps in the Tri-Cities. So until we actually have a decent fan base and or everybody has a concealed weapons permit and has a defense weapon on them, I highly suggest that it's probably not a good idea to be setting up these booths out in public somewhere where there are refugees being resettled. That just seems like common sense to me. So Spokane's obviously off limits. I mean, if somebody wants to, jump on the bandwagon and go for that, then go ahead. And then the ones that are in Seattle, Tacoma, I'm not going to go anywhere near that. But the Central Washington area, totally cool. The member that contacted me via email, he started giving me suggestions on where I could start discussing this kind of dialogue with people. And the first thing he said, which I have no offense to it or anything, is he told me, go to my place of worship and start talking among the other members about what's going on and start handing out pamphlets there. Well, therein lies my problem. Not only am I not religious, I'm more anti-organized religion kind of thing. And I thought about actually kind of just going to one of the churches randomly around my area. It says new members welcome, and just genuinely being involved every once in a while and see if I could start bringing up this dialogue. But I don't really know the ethics of services. I don't know how conservative they are, strict they are. And I just feel like I would be completely out of my element and I would insult people because I'm really good at that. It would just be better if I could find some advocates that agree with me about this, that are already in those kind of parts of this community. And I know I have a couple friends, so I will actually tag you in this, and sorry that this is really long. So I'll keep moving on with what the mission statement of this is. So is to heighten public awareness of the encroachment of Islam on our way of life, draw sharp distinctions between political Islam and private religious observance. That's the one thing that I have to argue against with him. He's trying to open up people to listen to him by humoring the narrative that there's a distinction between political Islam and religious Islam, and there's not, and that's evident in some of the brochures. So I think that I'll obviously kind of change the narrative if I feel I need to, but mixed messages is something I really try to avoid. So then it says, reverse Sharia concessions granted exclusively to Muslims. So I don't want to reverse it because we shouldn't have Sharia yet. That's the whole point of why I want this intervention thing to happen. So most people that know me know that I would prefer to do preventative measures than have to do intervention or fix things. Because not only is there damage done, but then you have to struggle with the whole fixing it thing. Why don't you just be aware of it and then prevent it in the first place and prevent a lot of trauma? That's what I'm going for. So then it says, block supremacist rhetoric from Islamic religious intolerance. So I'm not going to be as hardcore about that. I'm not saying, like, let's start letting all the skinheads in or whatever. And I'm not saying this is going to be an all-white or Caucasian narrative. I actually would love somebody that speaks Spanish so we could print out some of these things in Spanish as well. Because despite the fact, even if some of those Mexican immigrants are illegals, or that we have this kind of animosity towards each other because of our different cultural things, with the whole not speaking the same language and all kinds of other little tit-for-tats that are really irrelevant at this point. They are here. They contribute to our economy, our community. And most importantly, they are not threatening our very lives. Okay? I have some open-minded Christian friends or religious friends, and I really appreciate that. But some people have been completely turned off because I am associated, or I associate with the left-hand path community or the postmodern Satanist community. And there's plenty of informative shit online that can tell you that it's not anything about the devil that's in the Bible or anything like that. And I'm not going to go into that. So I've had a lot of people just shoot me down. And this is my thing. This is my argument. We are now dealing with a credible threat. Satanists, as well as atheists, Catholics, Christians, Jews, Scientologists, Mormons, whoever. We're all in deep shit. Because not only in Muslim culture is nothing but Muslim ideology allowed. If you do not conform to that, they kill you. I'm not even going to get into the gender thing, but I'm just saying in general. So, devout Christians, well, the Bible tells you to not stray away from Jesus, you're going to die. Jews pretty much are on the same level. You're going to die. Apparently, even though they're a little bit nicer to the Jews, which I find interesting. And if you're a Scientologist, you're going to die. If you're an atheist or a Satanist, you might actually kind of go with it. But once they start to actually rape your female friends or try to entice you to sell your children to them or start to tell your kids that they should be attacking other people, then you'll be upset. And they will attack you if you say anything against them. I just saw a video where a Muslim over in the UK set fire a Christmas display. And then you hear a bunch of Allah Akbar, blah blah blah, and I have no idea what the repercussions of what they did was, but I didn't actually hear about any either, so it obviously wasn't that big of a deal to them because they have Sharia courts over there, and or it was completely ignored altogether, which is what's going on in Europe. And of course, somebody would argue, well, that's Europe, but the thing I have concern with is that recently in Texas, a devout Muslim tried to stage that there was a hate crime made by burning down a mosque in Texas because of all the animosity going on between constitutionalists, Republicans, conservatives, and them staging outside of mosques. They're not pointing guns at anybody, but just standing there and letting them know, hey, we know what you're doing in there. And so I'm assuming just to incite more hostility, he tried to burn down the mosque and make it look like somebody else did it. And he's being charged with arson, but they're not blowing it way out of proportion. But in Las Vegas, Nevada, some guy, who I think is still really funny, decided to take raw bacon and wrap it around the doors of a mosque. The FBI is now offering a $5,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest of this person who did this prank, because it's a hate crime. So, I just find that a concern. Yeah, we're not obviously to the extent that Europe is, but it's a slippery slope. And according to the way that they do things, they have the Mecca, which is the psychic vampire, let's be your buddy and friend and coerce you into liking me thing. And then as soon as you turn your back and you trust them, they will stab you. That's why if anybody gets into the whole supremacist rhetoric, if there's some skinheads out there or whatever that say, hey, I want to be involved in spreading this, I'm not going to tell them no because of their own personal bias. I'm going to tell them you're not going to be putting swastikas on everything. But if you want to stick to what the pamphlets say and help with us, the more the better. And if anybody, that is hardcore religious and has a problem with Muslims because maybe they understand the history and the Crusades and everything, If they're a little bit harsh with the dialogue about Muslims, I'm definitely not going to say no to you. I'm just going to say, let's just try to stick to the pamphlets. I know we all have our personal opinions, but I'm not going to shy away from anything like that. And even if the founder or whatever of this group disagrees with what I'm saying, he made his pamphlets public. There is no copyright on them. So if I even have to be difficult and just take them and print them out myself without his permission, I will. I'm not profiting off of it. So I know copyright law. And I'm sure he won't actually try to pursue that. And even if he tried to, I really don't think it's going to go very far. Because the media, if you haven't noticed, is trying to keep this on the DL. It says to ensure religious freedom for Muslims who wish to leave Islam. Absolutely. Not only should we help any kind of immigrants, I wouldn't say the refugees per se, because I don't know how many of them actually want to leave. Because that's the problem. You're importing people who may not even want to be here, per se. I mean, they would love to, have all the social services and welfare and all that shit, which they're getting full benefits of, but they don't want any of the other stuff. Not only should we not attack them or confront them in an aggressive demeanor, because at some point, if you haven't gotten it so far, they will eventually come and attack us, and that's what we have to be ready for. We have to be prepared and aware and just be ready and on our toes for when this actually does happen. Because if we actually start to go and try to hunt them down like they're doing in Texas, then they're going to lock us up and they're going to use the law against us. That's the problem. And also, not only to ensure religious freedom, but understand that there are other demographics that look similar to Muslims. There are Hindus, people that are native to India, Sikhs, other different kinds of factions of faith from similar ethnic backgrounds that are not associated and in fact against Islam. That I think is just as important to point out. So it says, what are we are not about? Confronting Muslims or pro-Islamic critics. Okay, I just kind of covered that, but don't go and attack any of the supporters or anything on Twitter. I have been, so I mean I have no room to tell you not to, but when it comes to doing any kind of public informative things with this is just strictly unbiased dialogue to spread information. And it says getting into contentious arguments and making a scene. Well, again, what I'm saying is in one of these physical locations that we set up, obviously not creating a scene and creating some sort of conflict there is important. If you decide to create a scene or conflict on Facebook or in your own personal time, that's your free right, and I highly suggest you arm yourself before you do something like that. I'm not saying shoot anybody, but make sure you're prepared for that, because it's going to be nasty. So it says, making disparaging remarks about Muslims. I'm already doing that. I don't care. Again, just don't do it at the actual booth. Taking sides on domestic partisan politics. I obviously already kind of insinuated that. I don't care. We're not going to put like pro-Trump or pro-Bernie or anything. Not like that would matter. Factual persuasion is what we're going for. Familiarize yourself with handouts and be able to elaborate on all points. Shape the conversation around Islamic political ideology, not Muslims or their religious practices per se. So I wouldn't say obviously targeting Muslims, but I think it's completely fair to point out their culture, because that's the biggest threat we have, actually. Because even if they come over here and they insinuate that they're informing, they are just putting on a facade. And at the same time, when people's backs are turned, their real mentality or personality comes out. And then maybe you'll be the parent that'll be called and you'll find out that your daughter's at the hospital because her face needs to be completely stitched up.
12-year-old Morgan Graveline is recovering after what her mother and aunt say was an extreme case of bullying and assault.
That we're just trying to hold students back while she's still getting attacked, and eventually it took 4 teachers to get this
Morgan
boy
says
off
she
her.
was first punched and attacked on a school bus by one of 2 boys who wanted her as a girlfriend. Then last week she was punched by the other boy in the McLaughlin Middle School cafeteria, knocking out her 2 front teeth and dislocating her jaw. Her teeth are wired in right now.
I don't know, what your problem is. I'm not doing anything. And, I don't know why you're threatening me, basically. And he's like, oh, you watch. I'm going to make your face ugly after
Had
I'm
a
done
good
with you.
response on a blog spot to draw attention to the bullying incident in an effort to help others.
The guy who punched me in the cafeteria, he was walking by the street and he was looking around in my window and down the streets and stuff, almost looking for me, and I felt really scared.
He's been raised in a culture that women don't have a right to say no, and if they do say no, that they can be physically abused for it. So the culture needs to be addressed too. I'm just going to clip this here. I'll make a second video that goes over the rest of this pamphlet if you're interested. So I'm just actually trying to recruit people within the Central Washington, and I would absolutely love to have somebody who speaks Spanish, and I also need at least a couple people who are active in their religious institution in the valley. I have a couple people in mind that I know. I'll go ahead and tag you in this. So this wouldn't be anything that would be taking away excessive amounts of time from your family or your personal life or whatever. This would be similar to how they do some sort of organized protesting in Memorial Park. It would be more just like a table. I'll do all the tedious printing out the pamphlets, and I just physically need some support from people.